Well, I think the negotiators of the Food Aid Convention, as they're reformulating their rules and procedures in this negotiation, they need to be thinking about the role that this treaty plays in the broader food security governance architecture. In other words, we know that food aid is only a small slice of the broader initiatives that are taking place at the international level to address hunger. However, the outcome of the negotiation will have broad ramifications for that system. Now, we've got an international food security architecture right now that's, I would say, has been weakened over the past 30, 40 years. We've seen a drop in international agricultural investment, so that's harming productivity gains in developing countries. We have an international trade system which is widely acknowledged to be unbalanced in the sense that the poorest developing countries have gone from being net agricultural exporters to becoming net agricultural importers. And so when we're seeing this weakening investment and an unbalanced trade system, what that creates is vulnerability in the world's poorest countries, so that when an emergency situation does arise, those countries are actually more vulnerable than they might have been otherwise, and the need for food aid is enormous. So the outcome of the Food Aid Convention negotiations, if it results in a kind of outcome that might reduce the amount of food aid that is available on a regular basis, or might change the rules in the way in which food aid is given. So for example, if the price risk of changing the commitments is shifted from the donors to the recipients, this could have enormous ramifications in a system where the food security response is weak. And so in a way, I think what needs to happen is to ensure that food aid provides that backstop in emergency situations for the world's most vulnerable people, while we build up the other aspects of the food security architecture. Well, it's an interesting question, the role of non-Western donors in the Food Aid Convention. Some countries have expressed interest in potentially joining the Food Aid Convention. I understand South Africa, for example, and Russia have expressed interest. But, I mean, if we look at it this way, if you look at the donor list of the World Food Program last year, in 2010, there were something like 60 different countries donating food aid, whereas when you look at the Food Aid Convention, it's about 8 regular members. There's a big discrepancy there. So there are non-traditional donors, non-Western donors who do give food aid, but exactly what you said earlier, they can be erratic as donors. They could give, Saudi Arabia, for example, gave $500 million in the wake of the 2008 food price crisis, but hasn't nearly met that same amount of commitment in subsequent years. So it's a question of whether these new donors would like to join the convention. If they do, they have to make a commitment to regularly provide a certain amount of assistance. They may or may not want to do that. It totally depends on how they would like to place themselves in the global political context. Maybe they want to make that kind of commitment to illustrate that they are big players, big economic players, for example, within the G20. That might be South Africa's motivation, for example, and that may bring in new countries like India and Brazil who do donate food aid. They may wish to, come onto the international donor stage and make that commitment through joining the Food Aid Convention. So I think there's room there for these new donors, if they wish to join the convention, to come on board, and I think it would actually be really interesting and change the dynamics within this donors club to bring in more developing country voices.